Hi, it's Jennifer from Positively Learning, and today I wanted to jump on and answer a question I recently received about phonics intervention groups. I thought it was a great question. It was specifically asking, how many slides do you do? How does that all work? And I did go ahead and answer it, but I thought it would also make a great video. I can share what worked for us and how I adjusted things to get the most out of it for my students, and maybe that will spark some ideas for your small groups as well. So the question was about these Phonics Talks slides. This is loosely based on the idea of number talks. I wanted my students to be growing independently with their decoding skills and able to kind of run through the series of questions that at the beginning I'm asking them, but eventually I wanted them to grab onto those questions to ask themselves as they were getting like problem solving a word. So these are questions like, what do you see and what do you hear and what do you notice and so on. So I set up a series of slides. There's actually 600 words. It's 200 words per level. So here's the set of 3. Set 1 would be on grade level for kindergarten. So this would be a lot of short vowel practice. You're going to see a lot of CBC words. Then we are moving into words with initial digraphs or final digraphs, and even some silent E word spellings at the end. Set 2, let me show you that. That's moving into more of the on grade level for first grade. So we are seeing some more complex digraphs and blends. Maybe it's a initial digraph with a final blend at the end. And then we're moving into R controlled, some vowel teams, trigraphs, all different types of sound spellings. And then set 3 is going to be on grade level for second grade. So with my small groups, I was not using these slides for explicit instruction. We already had that in place. But instead, I may be using these slides for pre-teaching, some pre-exposure, or I'm using them for reteaching. That's what I normally was using them for. Maybe spiraling them back in, providing more guided practice with them. So if I was working with first grade, I might be working with the first set or whatever my students needed. And they may have already been exposed to all of these different sound spelling patterns. But for whatever reason, maybe it was in the gen ed classroom and they needed a different presentation, or they just weren't ready yet, or maybe that this instruction was the previous year and now they're showing that they're ready for it. So I would say we spent the majority of our time in set 1 and in set 2, although we did use set 3 a little bit if I had some students that were ready for that as well. It's very easy to differentiate. So what I want to do is just download a set and show them exactly how I made them work and what it looked like in our small groups. I'm going to link these below because if you look at the green preview button on each link, you will be able to download some slides to try out. There's 5 or 6 words in each one. So essentially you're getting like 15 different slides. Try out, see if that routine works for your students. Okay, so I'm going to download set 2. They all download as PowerPoints. And that is intentional, and I'll show you why in just a moment. Okay. So when you open it up, they all start with this opening slide. And what I want to do first, though, is go to View and Slide Sorter, and I'm going to diminish just a bit. Okay, so this is set 2. You can see all of these different words. There are 200 words per set, but there's 400 slides because each word has the question and the answer with a picture and some color coding. So I will give you a closer look at those in just a moment. But the reason I wanted these to be in PowerPoint and I wanted to talk about all 3 levels is because this is in PowerPoint, you can highlight one and delete it. Say that you wanted to do a performance assessment and you didn't want the answer slides in there, or you could just take it and move it. Or maybe you wanted specific sound spelling, more practice, you could grab all of those and move it up to the front. Maybe a word was a little tricky and you wanted it to come back, spiral it back in. You can mix and match these any way that you want. You can also mix and match them with the other sets, set 1 and set 2. So if you had a differentiated group, you could definitely make that work. Or you can use it exactly as is. It is in a scope and sequence, but you have that flexibility to change it. All right, so now let me show you what it looks like when I'm using it with my students. So we did this every day, so the routine quickly fell into place. I mentioned that I was asking these questions. Now, my students had language goals, so I was always looking for opportunities to apply what they were learning in their speech services, but also just encourage that student discourse because, my goal is for my students to be independent, not with me. So I am starting by asking these questions and asking either one question, two questions, or all four questions, whatever's appropriate. But then eventually, my goal is for my students to ask themselves this question. And so we use that as I am modeling, and then maybe students are answering back, or I'm modeling the answer back, or they then when they're ready, they can maybe do this with a peer, and then of course independent. So this is what it would look like in a small group. I'm displaying the word full screen, and my students are already like ready to dig in. What do you notice? Now, I will say a very fair answer would be like, I see a T and my name starts with a T. That's going to definitely happen, and that's totally fine. We're going to get into this routine. But I might just start with the first question, and that is it. What do you notice? Has 5 letters, and counting it out just to show that they know. What do you see? Oh, I see, the CK at the end, or I see the U. What do you hear? And then you might even like add on, like, is that what you expected to hear? Yes or no? Like, why or why not? And then what is the word? So the following shows you the word, a picture of the word, and then you can see the sentence stems at the beginning. So I just asked, what do you notice? I notice. And of course, remember, like I'm the one answering the questions a lot, but my students are grabbing on when they are ready. And then I also used color coding. Now, I will say the color coding follows like the science of reading. So we have the blends that are 2 different sounds, 2 different phonemes. So they're 2 different colors. The digraph is 1 sound, so it's 1 color. Now, I will say the colors don't represent anything specific. Like, so for example, the R is green, up there is green. Those are not corresponding. The only the only rule that I followed when I chose the colors was that they were contrasting. So like the green and the red were a contrasting set, so my students could see that they're 2 different sounds. All right, so I notice the T. And again, you're going to get answers like, I notice the R is green and that's my favorite color, and so on. But we're eventually going to get this routine. My students are going to be decoding, or I'm going to be decoding, and they're going to be following along with me, having like memory keep language that I'm using, and so on. All right, let's do a couple of more. What do you notice? What do you see? What do you hear? What is the word? And then they can check to see if they were right. Now, I did like doing this in a small group. I would say if we were pre-teaching, we might do three words, going through these questions, taking our time. If it was strictly review and my students were like this close to independent, I would be maybe going through 5 words, maybe 6 words or more. Still using the questions, still using the answer stems, the sentence stems, still checking our work to confirm what we think. But I might go through it at a little quicker pace. It is totally up to what your students need. I'm just going to run through a few more. I think that one is so telling because you've got the digraph at the beginning and the end, and we just did the blend at the beginning and the blend at the end. So maybe we're going to compare those. What do you notice? That we hear 2 sounds with the blend, 1 sound with the digraph. I love this one because we had the 2 sounds at the beginning and the 1 sound at the end. That's color coded. And so on. Okay, so what I would do is do, let's say, approximately 5 slides, and I would have this opened up and just diminish it so it's always ready to go. We might do 5 words at the beginning, 5 words at the end. This was a highly interactive and exciting activity for my students. I don't know why, but like whenever we did some kind of PowerPoint activity that had some kind of, it almost had that call and respond energy to it. I think that routine helped my students feel successful. They knew what to expect. They were more confident, more willing to decode, to take that risk with the group. So I found that these were a really high interest activity. So I would just keep them diminished so we could pop them up or down. Now, I have mentioned this. My phonics, I have a lot of different phonics intervention slides. I have a whole bundle of different ones, like syllables and mixed practice and phonics talks and things like that. I did work with a gen ed teacher, and she set these up with a timer in her PowerPoint, and she had this running as a independent center. Now, that did not meet the needs of my students. My students would possibly not be interacting quite as much if we weren't using those guided questions together, but her students were. So it was a great activity. They loved it. They got so much out of that center. So that's an idea as well. All right, so what I want to do is close out of this. Sure, I will save it. And I will be sure to put the links. So when you go to the link and you click on the green preview button, you're going to see some of the things that we just talked about. So this is set 2 that we just looked at. It's going to open up with the same information we saw, and then it has a few, I just like plucked them out of different places from those 200 words, and that way you can set them up, put them in presentation mode, and practice those with your students so they get used to the questions and used to how they're answering in those complete sentences. And this is set 2, but you also can grab the free preview for set 1 and set 3, whatever works for your students. All right, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and I would be happy to jump on here and talk about it. Thank you.